In 1989, the handheld gaming market looked like it was already sewn up. Nintendo launched the Game Boy and sold millions thanks to its low price, incredible battery life and unforgettable games. A year later, Sega entered the fight with the Game Gear, bringing Master System style gaming to a colour handheld, even if it did have a habit of eating batteries for breakfast. But while those two grabbed all of the headlines, Atari had something very different waiting in the wings. The Atari Lynx wasn't just another handheld, it was a machine that was years ahead of its time. Designed by members of the legendary Epyx team including Jay Miner and Dave Needle, who also played key roles in creating the Commodore Amiga, the Lynx packed technology that simply wasn't expected in a portable console. Powering the system was a 4 MHz MOS 65SC02 processor, backed up by a custom graphics chip called Suzy. Hello Suzy! Together they gave the Lynx hardware sprite scaling, stretching and distortion effects that were almost unheard of in handheld gaming at the time. The visuals were displayed on a 3.5-inch backlit colour LCD with a resolution of 160 by 102 pixels. It could draw from a palette of 4,096 colours, producing visuals that completely outclassed the Game Boy's 4 shades of green. The Lynx also came equipped with 64 kilobytes of system memory, 4-channel stereo sound through headphones, and one feature that's still unusual today, a reversible design that let you flip the console 180 degrees, making it just as comfortable for left-handed players as it was for right-handed ones. Looking back, the specification sheet reads more like something you'd expect from a home console than a handheld released in 1989. And when developers really began to understand the hardware, they created games that looked years ahead of their time. Welcome back to Popcorn Respawn, I'm Ashton, and today we're counting down 15 Atari Lynx games that pushed this remarkable little machine to its absolute limits. If Atari ever needed a game to convince people to buy a Lynx, this was it. Blue Lightning wastes absolutely no time showing off what the console could do. Instead of relying on simple scrolling backgrounds, the game constantly scales sprites to create a surprisingly convincing 3D flight effect. As you skim across the landscape, mountains, buildings and enemy aircraft all grow and shrink smoothly, creating a real sense of speed and depth. It's the kind of effect that immediately made the Game Boy feel old-fashioned. Sure, it isn't true 3D, but back in 1989 it looked nothing short of futuristic for a handheld. More importantly, it wasn't just a flashy tech demo, it was fast, responsive and genuinely fun to play, making it one of the Lynx's defining titles. Arcade conversions were nothing new, but Road Blasters showed just how close the Atari Lynx could get to the real thing. The road twists, bends and rushes towards you with an impressive sense of speed, while enemy vehicles, roadside objects and explosions all fill the screen without turning into an unreadable mess. The Lynx's hardware scaling does most of the heavy lifting here, constantly adjusting objects as they race towards the player and helping sell the illusion of depth. It's one of those games where you almost forget you're playing on a handheld from the late 1980s, and if you were lucky enough to own a Lynx back then, this was the sort of game you would proudly show off to your mates. Dirty Larry takes a different approach to impressing players. Instead of filling the screen with dozens of tiny enemies, it focuses on large, detailed character sprites that give the game a real comic book feel. Larry himself is packed with animation, while the city streets are full of signs, buildings and background details that make the unnamed city, feel surprisingly alive. It's rough around the edges in places, but visually it's one of the Lynx's most distinctive beat-em-ups. If Blue Lightning hinted at what the Lynx could do, Stun Runner went all in. The game throws you through twisting futuristic tunnels at ridiculous speeds, creating an experience that feels far more advanced than you'd expect from a handheld released in 1989. Using clever scaling and perspective effects, the Lynx creates the illusion of racing through a fully 3D world. Every bend, climb and sharp turn feels smooth, giving the game an incredible sense of momentum. It may not be true polygon graphics, but when you're hurtling through those tunnels at over 1,000 miles per hour, you honestly won't care. It's easily one of the most technically impressive games ever released for the system. Raiden is already one of the greatest shooters ever made, but the Lynx version has one trick that really sets it apart. Thanks to the console's ambidextrous design, you could rotate the Lynx and play in portrait mode, giving vertical shooters far more screen space than they would normally have on a handheld. It's a brilliant feature and Raiden makes the most of it. Enemy formations pour onto the screen, bullets fly in every direction and enormous bosses dominate the display without the action ever feeling cramped. Considering this is running on a handheld from the late 1980s, it's an incredibly impressive conversion. California Games was one of the Lynx's launch titles, and Atari clearly wanted to show off everything their new handheld could do. While Game Boy owners were staring at 4 shades of green, Lynx players were riding colourful waves, pulling BMX tricks and skating through bright, detailed environments. Each event has its own unique look, with smooth animation and plenty of personality, making the game feel much closer to an arcade machine than a typical handheld release. It might not push the hardware as hard as some later games on this list, but back in 1989 it was the perfect demonstration of why the Lynx felt so advanced. Warbirds takes things in a completely different direction. Rather than sticking to a fixed flight path, it gives you the freedom to dogfight across open skies in a World War I biplane. Enemy aircraft swoop around the screen, growing larger as they close in before disappearing into the distance once again. Meanwhile, the horizon shifts naturally as you bank and turn, creating a surprisingly convincing sense of flying through open space. It's an ambitious game that asks a lot from the Lynx, yet the console handles it remarkably well. Games like this remind you just how ambitious Atari was. While most handhelds were focused on simple side-scrollers and puzzle games, the Lynx was trying to squeeze a flight simulator into your pocket. And for 1989, that's pretty incredible. Racing games have always been a great way to show off a console's hardware, and Chequered Flag is no exception. Instead of taking the easy route, Atari aimed for a convincing 3D driving experience on a handheld, and the results are seriously impressive for the time. Tracks stretch into the distance, corners sweep naturally towards you, and rival cars smoothly grow and shrink as you close in or fall behind. The Lynx's hardware scaling plays a huge part in creating that sense of speed and depth, making every race feel far more dynamic than you'd expect from a portable console. It may not have the polish of later racing games, but as a technical showcase, Chequered Flag proved the Lynx was capable of delivering experiences that simply weren't possible on most other handhelds of its generation. Bringing Shadow of the Beast to a handheld must have sounded like a terrible idea. After all, the Amiga original was famous for its incredible artwork and beautiful, parallax scrolling landscapes, yet somehow the Lynx version captures much of that same atmosphere. The alien landscapes are packed with colour, the backgrounds move at different speeds to create a convincing sense of depth, and the oversized enemy sprites retain plenty of detail despite the smaller screen. No, it isn't quite the visual showcase of the Amiga version, but considering the hardware, it is an astonishing achievement. If you'd have shown this to someone in 1989, they'd probably assumed it was running on a home computer rather than a handheld. A massive point of distinction here, this is not a port of the legendary NES action platformer. Instead, the Lynx received a dedicated ground-up translation of Tecmo's original 1988 arcade beat-em-up, famously known to European gamers as Shadow Warriors. Tecmo's Ninja Gaiden made the jump to the Lynx surprisingly well. The first thing you'll notice is the size of the sprites. Ryu is big, well animated and packed with detail, while enemies move with a fluidity that makes combat feel fast and responsive. The dark city streets, industrial backdrops and flashes of neon all make excellent use of the Lynx's colour screen, creating an atmosphere that stands out from many other handheld games of the time. It may not be quite as well known as the NES version, but visually it's one of the strongest action games on the system. Hydra takes Atari's arcade classic and somehow crams it into a handheld without losing what made it special. As you tear through rivers and canals, your speedboat bounces over waves, launches off ramps and weaves between huge obstacles, all while the scenery rushes past at an impressive pace. What really stands out is the sense of movement. The Lynx constantly scales objects as you race towards them, making bridges, mines and enemy boats feel like they're part of a much larger world. It isn't just technically impressive either, it's one of those games that's simply hard to put down. Batman Returns proves that even licensed games could push the Lynx surprisingly hard. Gotham City is dark, gritty and packed with detail, while Batman himself is brought to life with large, well-animated sprites that look fantastic on the Lynx's backlit screen. The game also makes excellent use of visual effects. Explosions, flames and environmental details all help create a much richer presentation than you'd normally expect from a handheld release late in 1989. It's brutally difficult in places because apparently even Batman wasn't allowed an easy life, but it's also one of the console's best looking action games. Turbo Sub is one of those games that makes you wonder how the developers squeezed so much detail onto such a small screen. One minute you're skimming across the ocean surface, the next you're diving beneath the waves into underwater battles packed with enemy submarines, mines and incoming fire. The screen can get surprisingly busy, yet the Lynx keeps everything moving smoothly. Large enemy vessels grow as they approach, explosions fill the screen, and there's rarely a moment where the action feels cluttered or difficult to follow. It's a brilliant example of the Lynx handling far more on screen than most handhelds of its era could ever dream of. Not every game pushing the Lynx came out in the 1990s. Zaku arrived decades later as a homebrew release, proving there was still plenty of life left in Atari's forgotten handheld. Freed from many of the limitations developers faced back in the day, the team produced one of the most colourful and polished games ever seen on the system. The sprite work is superb, the animation is wonderfully smooth, and the screen is packed with vibrant enemies, spectacular boss battles and beautifully detailed backgrounds. It almost feels like a glimpse into an alternate timeline where Atari kept supporting the Lynx well into the modern era. More than 30 years after the console launched, Zaku reminded everyone just how capable the hardware really was. Battle Wheels is one of the most technically ambitious games ever released for the Atari Lynx. Viewed entirely from the cockpit, it drops you into fast-paced vehicular combat years before games like Twisted Metal made the idea famous. As rival vehicles race around the arena, they smoothly grow and shrink with distance, helping create a convincing sense of speed and space. Combined with the change in perspective and fluid animation, it delivers an experience that still feels remarkably ambitious for a handheld game. It's the perfect game to end on because it sums up exactly what made the Lynx so special. It didn't just try to match its rivals, it tried to outclass them. The Atari Lynx was a console that was simply ahead of its time. Its backlit, colour screen, custom graphics hardware and built-in scaling effects allowed developers to create games that looked unlike anything else you could carry in your pocket. So why didn't it win? Ironically, many of the things that made the Lynx so impressive also made it difficult to sell. Its advanced hardware made it expensive. The bright backlit screen and powerful custom chips drained 6 AA batteries in just a few hours, and the console itself was considerably larger than the Game Boy. Meanwhile, Nintendo focused on affordability, long battery life and an incredible library of games. It wasn't the most powerful handheld, but it was the one most people could afford and take anywhere. Even so, the Lynx deserves to be remembered as one of the most ambitious handhelds ever created. More than 3 decades later, these games are proof that Atari's engineers weren't just thinking about the next few years, they were thinking about the future of handheld gaming. And now it's over to you. Which Atari Lynx game impressed you the most and I completely overlooked a classic? Let me know in the comments below. If you enjoyed this look back at one of gaming's most underrated handhelds, don't forget to like the video, and why not check out the rest of the series of hardware that pushed the system to its limits, where I've already covered legendary systems like the Super Nintendo, Commodore 64 and Sega Mega Drive, to name just a few. If you haven't already, please subscribe to Popcorn Respawn and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next retro hardware deep dive. Thanks for watching, and until the next time, see ya!
Ooh, videos and I am alive.